here on this Wednesday lunch hour. Appreciate everybody for coming by to check out this live stream. I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about that we have going on new at the farm, but the real issue that I have weighing on me this afternoon is more related to political matters and governance and kind of the state of the world at large. And this YouTube channel, Rowan Ridge Farm, here, we are in our infancy. This is a young channel, although I have been doing teaching and speaking for most of my adult life. And I've been kind of grappling, going back and forth with the desire to talk about current events that veer into the political with everything happening recently with the Charlie Kirk assassination. I made a couple videos that were tangentially related to that, not directly about it because I don't have any direct knowledge or experience to talk about, but more in terms of how we as individuals have to prepare ourselves to be able to act and react in a time when we're not any longer able to invest or outsource our morals and our principles to others, but rather we have to take responsibility of that for ourselves. And there's part of me as I'm working on a series about breeding pigs because ultimately pigs are my passion. I kind of got into pigs accidentally, wanting to raise beef. I just got pigs to clear the pasture, then I was going to put them in the freezer. And I figured I'd be done with that. And then I get into beef and raise the kind of meat that I like to eat, have food freedom and independence here in the free state of New Hampshire. And I wound up falling in love with the pigs, and it's been ever thus. I really like the pigs, and one of my goals here on YouTube is to try to help other people and encourage other people to take those first steps and to get started raising pigs, and then to take subsequent steps and to actually participate in the genetics of the animals that you're raising and to play with those genetics and get into breeding as well. And at the same time, there are these socially traumatic events that are happening, like assassinations of public figures, and it's kinda hard for me to just talk about breeding pigs and genetics and fencing and infrastructure and marketing when the world is kind of falling down around our ears. And I think that in this day of YouTubing and YouTubers, it's important to me to be able to present my entire self and not just a carefully curated part of, my interests, but to actually be able to talk candidly with those of you who follow me. And really to be able to talk not only about the specifics of farming from a technical standpoint, and there's a lot to talk about there, but there's also been a lot done in that regard, but rather to talk also about the things that motivate or drive us to farming and encourage us to take a sort of divergent path that goes off of the beaten path and outside of the mainstream to take that active role in our lives and in our own freedom and ability to provide food for ourselves and for our family. The why is really important. And when we start talking about the why, it's usually a pretty quick divergence there off that beaten path. When we start talking about the why before we start getting into politics and social issues and the state of the world, because there was a time not that long ago when about 50% of the country were farmers. And if you wanted to learn how to raise pigs, you didn't need to go on YouTube. You didn't need to subscribe to the Rowan Ridge Farm YouTube channel, which, if you haven't yet, I would love it if you do. But you could just talk to your neighbor or your uncle or your cousins or somebody, and they would be able to show you around their farm and give you all the pointers that you need to be able to get started and to be relatively successful. And these days, there's so much information that it can be hard to really narrow down which information is actually credible and useful, and to pick a direction to go, because it's not a lack of information, it's a lack of direction and specificity. And so this fall, my wife and I have decided to start offering classes on our farm where we are looking to connect with folks that are interested in raising piglets in spring of 2026, get everybody together and do a small class on our farm where we kind of take 2 days, October 25th and 26th, and we're going to go over all the nuts and bolts of learning the basics of how we started out and what we're doing with raising pigs, take questions and compare, ideas like what sort of infrastructure we need, what the cost of raising piglets would be. We're going to talk about the breeds, both for meat quality and personality and sort of socializing your animals. We're going to talk about selecting a breeder as well as selecting the breeds. We're going to talk about selecting a butcher and what to budget for that and what to expect when you're working with a butcher for the first time, as well as doing a live demo of castration. And one of the things that I'm hoping that we can do, because obviously talking to you guys here on YouTube, I realize that most of you are not in New England. And so being able to have people attend live is going to be, it's going to be a very limited group of people that are going to be able to do that. But what I'm hoping is that we can get some video and make that available, for those of you who would like access to that. And there's a link in the description below here, below this video, where you can check out that class. It's called Homestead Pigs 101. And I'm really excited about being able to offer this. Um, I wish that we were not living in a world where it was necessary to seek out specialized education for some of this stuff. And certainly for some people, it may not be entirely necessary to go this route. But where we are right now, we got here because life was relatively convenient and easy. And we had other people to use as avatars to project our social values, right? We had Charlie Kirks and Rush Limbaughs and, you know, you name it. Now, there's a lot of people who were sort of figureheads for different political movements. I'm not saying like personally, I wasn't a huge fan of Charlie Kirk. I mean, I thought he was a smart guy. I listened to a lot of his debates and I thought he, like specifically talking about abortion, he was a real sharp guy. He can make a real good argument, for, the pro-life side. And he did it in a way that was very humble and, without dunking on people. Ben Shapiro as well, and I really, really don't care for Ben Shapiro, being perfectly candid, but he does a really good job of defending a pro-life position. But my point is, we're not at a point now where there's this buffer zone between us and the values that we hold and the beliefs that we have where we can outsource those into other people. We have to wear those things on our sleeve and take responsibility for that. And this comes right down into the world of politics as well. So this past weekend, I was celebrating my 43rd birthday with my family and some close friends, and they came over. And you know, these friends, they run a small store nearby where we are in Western New Hampshire, and they're always kind of pushing me to try to get me to provide them with some meat that they can sell. Very supportive, great friends, and they really love what we're doing there on the farm, and they want to be able to help. And every time they ask for meat, I say, I don't have any meat that you can sell because the meat that I have is not USDA inspected. And because it's not USDA inspected, I'm not legally allowed to sell it by the cut. And we invariably go down this pathway of talking about how ridiculous that is and how unfortunate that is, because the reality is it's gatekeeping for the food industry, basically, to keep things on the status quo so that the food industry will be controlled by the large mechanized producers of meat so that they can say how much people are allowed to eat and what quality, rather than having a decentralized food system where people feed their own communities and it's done on a much smaller scale with a much shorter leash. And they always are asking me and talking to me about, like, hey, you should get into politics and maybe run for some of these positions in the state. Because here in New Hampshire, the live free or die state, ironically, we had a bill in our state Congress that would have allowed small farmers like myself to get custom cut, meaning the way that you process wild game. So it's not USDA inspected, it's still clean, still 100% edible. All of the things that actually make food safe to eat or not, those standards are all even across the board. It just doesn't have a guy who works for the USDA with the little hat and the name tag and the clipboard standing there. Other than that, it's all the same. And you know, to be, it would allow us basically to sell meat by the cut, like the way that you buy it in the store. So when you go to Dollar General, you go to Walmart, you go to any grocery store and you buy a package of pork chops, there's the entire rest of the pig that you're not buying. Some of that pig might be in the sausage that's over there in the freezer, or some of it may be in the bacon that's across the way in the cooler. You're not buying the whole pig, you're just selecting what you want and you go on your way. People buy in very small pieces, but we're not able to sell in small increments. We have to sell by the entire animal if we are using a custom processor who is not USDA inspected. And the point of this bill was that within the state of New Hampshire, we should be permitted to butcher and sell our meat however we want to. We're not talking about having, meat crossing state lines. We're talking about intra-state commerce, and the idea that we somehow need federal oversight for intrastate products that are being produced and consumed locally kind of flies in the face of the whole live free or die ethos. And this bill, that House Bill 396, 2025, more or less got struck down. And it kind of came back. They're working on it supposedly now, and it's just very frustrating to see this happen because I wanna be able to just raise pigs, raise my family, and go home. I don't wanna have to get involved in politics, but the reality is we've got people making laws and people in our political system who are not responsible, who are not competent, who have no idea how the sausage gets made, figuratively or literally. And I'm talking on the local level, from the bean counters that regulate the hell. I mean, New Hampshire is a small state with no state income tax. A lot of people move here because the live free or die porcupine ethos, everybody loves that. And that's great. And then you come here, and what you find is instead of having an overarching state government that crushes you with state taxes like New York, where I spent a good portion of my life growing up, what you have in New Hampshire is you don't it's just that same type of power, only it's decentralized into towns. And so the towns crush you with all of their property taxes and this tax and the vehicle registration and all this other stuff, where it costs like $1,000 to keep two vehicles to get them registered in your town. And then you got to pay for this, you got to pay for that. And it's this consistent ongoing process of new laws because every person who is retired and has a little bit of money and nothing better to do than attend town meetings goes to the town meetings and says, "Oh, I have a new idea for a law. Let's make this area of town a historical district, which means that nobody's allowed to buy or sell anything there. It's just got to be preserved exactly as is," and basically turns your town into an HOA. Which, like, if you want to live in an HOA, go to Arizona or southern Utah. There are retirement communities out there. You can do that, but there's some of us who are trying to build businesses, build family. We want growth so that we can have something worth passing down to the next generation. But you can't do that because the people that are coming to that are coming to the town meetings and the getting involved in politics are people with wackadoo, outlandish values that don't really represent the younger people in the constituency of the area. But the problem is people like myself, I can come on here and I can sound off for, 15, 20, 30 minutes once a week on my lunch break while I'm at work. But when I go home, I got animals to feed. I got kids and a wife and home, and my dad lives with us. So we got other responsibilities, and nobody in farming wants to get their hands dirty in politics. But the reality is, until we reach that point where we're ready to get political, I think we're going to be stuck in a really rough spot where we're going to continue to be ruled by people who are lawyers and bankers. And those are not people that have our best interest in mind by any stretch. I mean, if we look at federal politicians that everybody, the nation over, may be familiar with, some names, the only politician that I would say that I have respect for and that I think is actually a real public servant and is somebody that I would want to have more responsibility and more power is a guy named Thomas Massey. I believe he is out of Ohio, and he is actually a farmer. He's also an MIT educated engineer, I believe is what his degree is in. I've heard him on Tim Pool's Timcast IRL talking about his chicken coop system that he made with like this solar rig that would like open and close the doors when the sun goes up and goes down. Very elaborate type of thing, but he actually understands the consequence of laws that are passed by politicians that got nothing better to do other than just sign without even reading stuff. And he actually is the one person who is behind the Prime Act, which is a nationwide, basically a nationwide excusal from having to deal with USDA processing in order to sell meat within your state. The idea of federal regulations to sell meat, I guess that kind of makes sense if I'm talking about shipping some pork chops out to California. You want to make sure that you're doing that correctly because the person in California can't come see my farm, at least not very easily. And so they don't have that way to verify. But if I'm selling food within my own community and people are literally coming to the farm to pick it up and people are able to see, to participate, to inspect, you really think that the USDA inspector at a plant that is off of my farm who's standing there, that they're in a better position to really gauge the cleanliness and the thoroughness of what I'm doing on my farm as opposed to somebody in my community who's actually interacting with me, who's buying from me. And news travels fast in a small town. And the idea is that if we have more decentralized production of food, we can feed our own communities, we can feed our own towns. We're not having to go as far afield. We're not buying food from other countries or all the way across the country. We can feed our own towns, our own communities, and we require less oversight and regulation to do so because we're actually closer to it. And so we can engage and participate. And so everybody was talking to me at dinner on Sunday about how you need to get into politics because, you can argue about things and you make good points and you can talk to people about things. And, you know, there's part of me where I would love the opportunity to find an office that would really be a good fit because all of the bigger problems that people worry about, and we have a lot going on with national politics right now, where we see people in the FBI doing things and we're just wringing our hands and, face palming, especially with the, just using the current events with Charlie Kirk and that whole investigation, if you want to call it that, that's going on, where it's like there's so many things that don't add up. And it's like these people do not seem to be competent. They're either very incompetent or very crooked, but there's a lot of problems, and like that trickles down all the way to the towns that we live in. And so we wind up with these small town tyrants that have nothing better to do and nobody challenging them. So they build regulations, they build laws, and they make things unnecessarily difficult for everybody else. And the problem is that we don't have younger people who are interested in growing businesses, interested in growing economy, who have the time and the willingness to stick their neck out, get into those positions, and take the power to actually start changing laws and regulations to improve things. And generally speaking, the people who want power the most are the people who deserve to have it the least and who will be the most dangerous if they have it. And the people who tend to not want that power and that responsibility and just want to be left alone, those are usually the people who are going to make the best leaders. And at the end of the day, we need people in offices of power who understand life and death struggles, the way the economy works on a very person to person, small, very down to earth, regulate, not regulation wise, but like how the economy works on a very small scale, not necessarily moving, faceless banks moving millions and billions of dollars all over the place and doing these deals that are all blind and just kind of these handshakes in a dark boardroom somewhere, but where you know what it's like to actually give people a product that is going to go into their freezer, where you're responsible for how you're treating this animal, and then that quality and that love and that attention that you put into it, that's something that you are then giving to somebody else who's paying a considerable amount for it, and you got to make sure that you're giving them something that is actually worthwhile. That idea of value is a big part of farming. It's not just pork chops, it's not just bacon, because you can get pork chops and bacon. The reason why people excuse me, the reason why people come to our farm, and your farms as well, presumably, if you're watching and are also involved in farming, you know, people can get cheaper pork chops, people can get cheaper items, but they come to our farms because of the value of what is put into the work that we do and the animals that we raise and the products, crops, and in some cases, I don't raise crops, only animals, but that value is why people are coming into this and why they're involved. And value is a concept that is completely missing in politics because everything is just about numbers, but completely detached from and devoid of any real understanding or care for value. And that is something that I am hoping that we can pass on to the next generation. But it's very hard to do that when all of your leaders are only interested in just acting like parasites and sucking off of everything that you have, because no matter how much you give them, it's never enough. They just want to keep taking more. And there's never a good argument for, okay, well, we just need this much and then we can give you a break. You've already paid for this, so we can stop taxing it. Your parents paid taxes on all that money. So when they give that money to you, maybe we don't have to turn around and then tax that money that's already been taxed like five different times. No, they're just going to keep on doing it. And so this isn't a declaration of intent to run for office as such, but my position is and was, when everybody was talking to me about this the other day at dinner, I believe that your occupation chooses you. I don't believe that you choose your occupation. In a lot of ways, everything that I have done in my life has been a result of just where my life has taken me. And I believe that God controls a lot of that stuff, and I'm definitely open to running for office and exercising political power in order to simplify and give freedom to people who want to support themselves, who want to run businesses, who want to raise family and establish value and build in the community, instead of those who want to retire into a community and just siphon off the value that others who came before them have put into that community, but rather people who really want to build something. And that's why we need farmers in politics, because farmers understand very clearly the value of growth and building, and that if you're not growing and building, you're not doing anything, because you can't get speculative value on raising beef or raising hay. You're building something, you're growing something, and if you don't have something to show for yourself, guess what? You can't just chalk it up to being a loss and, well, see you next year. Somebody writes me a check for piglets in the spring, they're getting piglets, or they're getting their money back. But I can't just say, "Oh, too bad." You have to have something to show for that. It's not all this, ethereal, abstract nonsense. There is value and production that is directly attached to what we do. And that's something that's currently missing from the political space. And I don't think it's too complicated for people to understand. I think that, number one, culturally speaking, yeah, we need more people participating in growing and understanding and exploring value. And I don't just mean values, like in relationship to the Charlie Kirk discussion that I had in a previous video, although I think that's an important part of the conversation as well. But I'm talking about value that goes into something. In other words, for example, this watch that I have. This is a watch made by Aries. It's a, they make small batches of watches. I could get them, a 20, 30, 40, $50 watch off of Amazon, or what's that, Movement watches. That one, I remember Ben Shapiro used to do an ad for them back in the day. And they make like these real slick looking cheap watches that you can tell when you handle them that they're cheap. But when you see them on the Instagram ads, they look fancy. But when you touch them and you feel them and you hold them, you can tell that they're not really, that they're made with the least amount of input that they can, because their goal is to make a buck, not create value and be something that you're going to pass on to your kids. And when it comes to, I like nice things. I like knives, I like guns, and I like spending money on things that, not for the sake of being collectible, but for the sake of value, where it's like, yeah, I would rather spend 2, $300 on a knife, because that knife is crafted in America. It's made with precision. Shout out to Montana Knife Company, to all 2 of my live viewers, and thank you guys for being here and bearing with me. But having, being willing to spend money on those things, because I know that those are things that are going to last and that are going to go the distance, that I'm going to be able to pass on to my kids, that they can pass on to their kids. It's not just some forgettable thing that gets the job done for now and good enough for government work. And that's the same concept with what we're doing in farming. There's plenty of places you can go buy pork chops and bacon, but what we're doing by putting our time and our effort to make sure that things are done right, to have animals that are raised with care, that are going to taste better, that are going to look better, that are going to improve the health of the soil on our properties, that are going to create more value and more productivity over the generations. Like, that's value, and that actually does matter. And more people need to have an awareness of that fact. It's not just, this thing that a handful of niche YouTubers and hillbillies are doing. And, my instinct tells me that before long there's going to be things happening in our society where we're going to be looking towards communal resources and community people that we know, to be able to kind of help and to coexist and work together. Otherwise, we're going to have some problems, because even farmers, it's not like, the whole apocalyptic social upheaval and unrest scenario is one that looks substantially different for small farmers and homesteaders. Because I got news for you. What is it that you think the chickens are going to eat, and what do you think the pigs are going to eat? I mean, granted, this year is a magnificent year for mast. So we got acorns out the wazoo. I can't walk up the driveway without like bending over and picking up acorns and putting them in a bucket. And I'm like, it's hard to just leave them there and let the car run over them, because the acorns are such a magnificent source of nutrition for the pigs, and they're just falling off the trees. They are everywhere. But next year, there's not going to be acorns, right? And so you could, get pigs to survive for a certain period of time on just acorns, or on scraps, on forage, whatever they come up with in the field, root hog or die, a little bit of leftover milk, leftover eggs. But at some point, what we're doing with our animals requires significant input in terms of energy, heating water, waterers throughout the winter so that our animals are able to drink. And then also, in terms of feed and packaging and butchering, all of those things require a lot of inputs. And so, in a, downfall of society, God forbid, scenario, it's gonna be much different than just a watch me scenario, and I'm gonna go off into the bush and survive off the fat of the land type of thing, because 'cause I'm a farmer. It's gonna require still collaboration and community, and people able to work together and to be useful and to serve each other. And that's ultimately what farming comes down to, is you gotta be able to serve other people and put their needs first. And that mindset, like, I don't think there really is a way to be effective as a farmer and to make money unless you are doing that. Because people are going to be able to tell if you're in it for the wrong reasons because your products are going to reflect it, and it's a self-selecting process more or less, and news travels fast. And so that is kind of the thesis for my idea that we need more farmers in politics, because being able to devote your life to serving others, whether it's the animals that you're serving when you're taking care of them and laboring at great physical and emotional expense, and all the effort that goes into putting those animals, their needs first. Because I mean, I love my wife, I love my kids, but at the end of the day, the pigs gotta eat, and they know that, and they support that, and they support me, which is why I'm able to do this. But there's a very real, like, there's no days off there. When it's 10 below 0, I'm out there dragging buckets around and feeding the pigs and throwing hay in there so they can stay warm, and all that stuff. You can't get away without that. There's no quick, easy way to the top where it's like, "Oh, tried this magical hack and now I have bacon in like 3 months." No, you're going to wait 7 months just like everybody else, maybe 8, before you send that pig to the butcher, and then you got to wait for that product to get cured, and you have to wait till you get it back, and then you have a product that you can sell people. And after all that waiting, either the work that you did, either you did it the right way and it's going to show, or the corners that you cut are going to show. And then you're going to have the next 7, 8 months to beat yourself up about it and to learn a hard lesson so that you don't do that again. But that's the reality, the real talk that is missing from our political leadership. And I would argue that it's incumbent upon us as farmers to, number one, to put our opinion out there and to be more public facing in the political and social discourse, which is one of the reasons why I am here blathering on this YouTube channel, because there's a reason why I got into farming, and that's as important, if not more important, than the pork chops and the bacon. I love the pigs, I love eating pork, but I care a lot more about the values and the value that I am attempting to create, and what I want to teach my family and what I want to give to my community. I care more about those things than I do about teaching people like the best breed of piglets, to raise on a homestead. And, that's obviously an issue we can talk about. And I do have other videos about the best breeds of piglets and all that stuff. But the thing that is most important is why. Why are we doing this? And the reason why we're out here doing this stuff, I think for a lot of us, if we're not more forward about that and more front facing with our values, there's going to be no more of that why left to go for anymore. Because I can tell you from my standpoint, I grew up in upstate New York, about an hour and a half north of the city, used to be all dairy farms. And then what happens over the city expands and people come north and people come north, and the laws and the politics change. And then, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, and bylaws and zoning laws, this, that, and the other. Now you can't run a chainsaw between this hour and that hour because why? Because people come from the city and they want to turn it into an extension of a bedroom community because, this is my vacation home, right? Because people aren't living and actually doing anything. And so the people who said, I just don't want to be bothered anymore, instead of planting a flag in the ground, and this is something that, I'll be honest, like, I think a lot of the responsibility for this lies on, like, the boomers, my parents' generation. No offense, love my parents, but they were like, "Well, there's a big country out there. We can just go somewhere else. We'll just kinda, go this way or that way, and we can make a little room, and we don't have to deal with it." And so off they go. And then what happens, the people with this noxious idea of big government expansion and controlling everything that everybody does all the time, they're like locusts there's never enough. There's never a point where they say, "Okay, you know what? We're good. We have our little bedroom community. We're happy where we are. We're just gonna hang out here. We don't have to go into any more rural communities, change the laws, and re-educate those yokels about how they really need to live and, like, indoctrinate their children and all that other nonsense. No, we're gonna let them have their way of life because we have San Francisco, we have New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and Boston. We're just gonna leave everybody else. You guys do your thing. We're happy here," right? What happens is you move out to the country and they follow with you. And then they're out in the country and it's like, wait a minute, I thought I was out in the country. I thought this is rural New Hampshire. Like, I understand upstate New York is spitting distance from the city. So you're going to get some of that foolishness that comes with that urban culture and the mindset, and some of it I welcome because it's like, okay, there's people that don't understand or don't know because living on a farm, living in a rural area where cutting wood and shooting guns maybe, is not a normal thing. And so it's like, wait, this is a little weird. Why are you doing this? Like, I'm willing to welcome those people in with open arms and say, hey, let me show you how to shoot a 22. Let's take some soda cans or some soda bottles and go in the backyard and I'll show you a great time with the 22 and you'll have tons of fun. We'll go shoot rats in the barn at night in the summer. Like, that's a lot of fun. And I think it's more fun than people from the city actually realize, and so it's not all like, hatred and xenophobia or whatever you want to call it. It's more a matter of just asking or wanting people to be respectful, but at the end of the day, you can't bargain with locusts. You can't bargain with these people that are just streaming in and taking up space, and because you're too busy working, you're too busy raising a family, you're too busy working on fences, you're too busy watering and feeding your pigs or butchering or collecting your eggs and taking care of your chickens or whatever it is that you're doing to be productive and to build value in your own community. You're too busy with that, so they get into office, they get into the school board, they get into the town government, they get on the zoning board, and they get to tell you how you're gonna live and what you may or may not do with your own property that you're paying an arm and a leg for, and then they're gonna take your tax dollars to make sure that you have to do what they say and that that they're in charge and that they're the boss, and that's unacceptable, and we can't have that because we're getting to a point where retreating and retreating and retreating takes you so far, and then you have your back against the wall. And then where do you go once your back is against the wall and there's nowhere else left for you to go? And we're reaching that point. And both physically with, the land in this country, and then socially looking at the events of what happened with Charlie Kirk and the assassination and the widespread political polling indicating that and I'm not going to quote the exact numbers because I'll get them wrong, but I know it's more than a tiny fringe of wacko extremists on the left believe that it's totally acceptable to use violence and assassination and to celebrate everything that is going on when people are dying that you disagree with politically. And it's like, we got here because we kept giving ground and not using political power and said, "Oh, you know what? We'll be bigger, we'll be better," and kind of fight with one hand tied behind our back and okay, now then, we don't need to get that. And where has that gotten us? So, um I'm not looking for a life of political anything, but at this point, I am starting to actively recognize the fact that if I don't take the initiative to involve myself locally, at the very least, to start out with, then I am going to be ruled by other people who are willing and ready to take that opportunity for themselves. So, to the three of you who are watching, I really want to say I appreciate you guys watching the stream. Everybody has been really quiet, so maybe you're at work as well. Speaking of which, I'm going to have to conclude this stream in a moment and get back to work as well. If you're not already subscribed, I'd love it if you subscribe. I love to hear comments, questions, and all that stuff because the interactions that I get on these live streams gives me something to think about and provides fuel for upcoming videos. I want to talk a little bit more moving forward about kind of education and mentorship in farming because I think that's a real important thing building community around farming and providing education. As I said earlier, we're doing a class for people who are getting started in pigs, Homestead Pigs 101. If you're in New England, New Hampshire, I linked it down in the description of the video. It's nhpork.com/classes, and something to check out. I'd like your feedback. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys on the next video. I believe my wife Myra is one of the two viewers. I love you, sweetheart, and tell the girls I love them as well. And I will see you all after work. Well, not you all, like you all, my family, you all, but viewers. I'll see my viewers on the next. It gets really complicated sometimes. I'll see you guys on the next video or live stream, and let's make America farm